Buried underneath the ground for nearly 9,000 years laid one of the world's oldest human settlements. A settlement that once dug up and rediscovered had puzzled archaeologists because of its uncommon traits. Despite being the world's oldest buildings, carved with intricate details and possibly early forms of writing and astrology, there were no signs of early agriculture or even stable food sources. But even more strangely is that no graves were ever recovered at the site. Gobekli Tepe rewrote the way that we think of Neolithic humans, and by extension, history. Gobekli Tepe, located in southeastern Turkey, is often referred to as the world's oldest human complex. Its age and sophistication challenge everything we thought we knew about prehistoric humans. Its discovery has led to changes in how we understand the lives of early human civilizations. It prompted a reevaluation of the evolution of religion, architecture, and social organization. Yet despite years and years of study, Gobekli Tepe still holds many mysteries. From its purpose to the identity of its builders, there's not much that we know about this ancient site, making it one of the most mysterious archaeological sites ever discovered. Gobekli Tepe was first identified in the 1960s by a team of Turkish and German archaeologists during a survey of the area, but its significance wasn't recognized until much later. It wasn't until the mid-1990s that German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt, working with the German Archaeological Institute, began detailed excavations, revealing the site's true complexity. What they found was a large, ancient sanctuary that predated the well-known megalithic structures like Stonehenge and the Egyptian pyramids by thousands and thousands of years. Radiocarbon dating placed Gobekli Tepe's construction around 9600 BCE, suggesting it was built during the late Epi-Paleolithic age or during the early Neolithic period. This timeframe being when humans first began to domesticate animals and early farming methods, instead of having to depend on roaming animals for food. Gobekli Tepe is the earliest Neolithic site ever discovered, and by extension the oldest human structure in the world. The site consists of a series of large, circular, and oval-shaped enclosures with massive stone pillars, many of which are carved with intricate reliefs of animals such as lions. The carving suggests that the site is not just a settlement but a ritual center, possibly used for religious or ceremonial purposes, and the animals likely representing some form of their religion. Archaeologists still do not fully understand if the site was buried intentionally by the people or if it had been subject to nature. If the site was indeed deliberately buried around 8000 BCE, that only adds to the mystery, as it seems to have been intentionally preserved or hidden, as some archaeologists say. One of the most confusing aspects of the site is the identity of its builders. The site's construction predates known agricultural societies and settled communities in the region. For a long time, it was believed that such a monumental structure could only have been built by a highly organized, advanced civilization with the ability to sustain large populations. However, some argue that the people who built Gobekli Tepe were likely still hunter-gatherers, a group not traditionally associated with such large-scale farming projects, much less buildings. This fact challenges traditional assumptions about the capabilities of prehistoric societies, and it raises a lot of questions about social and technological skills of early humans. Most human civilizations have only been able to reach large-scale stone architecture long after being able to develop farming. But if these archaeologists are correct in their assumptions, then that would mean that the builders had accomplished building techniques, carving tools strong enough to cut into stone, and built homes before even having a stable food source, which would be a massive change in how we understand history. Additionally, some scholars have further proposed that Gobekli Tepe might have been built by groups of people who were transitioning from a nomadic to a more settled way of life, possibly as a response to climatic changes or as part of early religious or communal efforts. The site could have functioned more as like a religious destination than an actual living space, although there is much evidence that people did in fact live there. The exact nature of society that created it remains unclear, but some have suggested that it could have been a congregation of people united by religious or spiritual beliefs, perhaps even multiple people joining into a cult-like group with a shared purpose. The highly elaborate carvings and the sheer scale of the site indicate a very sophisticated understanding of ritual and community life, even if the builders were not fully yet agricultural or even settled in their way of life. Perhaps the greatest mystery of Gobekli Tepe is its purpose. While many ancient sites like temples and pyramids clearly serve religious or ceremonial purposes, the exact role of Gobekli Tepe remains a topic of debate among archaeologists. Its design and layout suggest it was intended for some form of collective ritual activity. The sheer scale of the site suggests it was built for a large group of people. I mean, this archaeological site is absolutely massive. Besides the actual buildings themselves, the only other way that we can comprehend what the site would have been used for or the people living there is the animal carvings. The carvings depict a range of animals, from wild boars and foxes to snakes, birds, and even vultures. Some pillars even show scenes that may represent early development or symbolic thinking, perhaps even a creation myth for these people's religion. Certain carvings appear to depict a symbolic representation of the afterlife, with images of human figures associated with certain animal carvings. The presence of vultures, which are associated with death and afterlife in many other cultures, suggests that the site may have been a place where rituals related to death and burial were practiced. However, this remains speculative as the exact meaning behind the carvings is unclear. Some scholars have argued that these animals may have had some symbolic significance, perhaps representing totemic animals associated with a specific tribe or a family. Others suggest that the carvings could represent a form of proto-writing or early communication. These symbols could then be used to convey important messages or mythological stories, with these symbols then being used to convey an important message or many mythological stories. Several theories about its purpose have been proposed, including that it was an early temple for spiritual practices, a ceremonial gathering place, or even an astronomical observatory. Some scholars believe that the animal carvings could represent early forms of astrology, in the form of representing constellations as certain animals, like the Greeks did. The site may have also served as a place where people from surrounding areas gathered for important events, not just a single tribe, but various types of people in the area. One of the most famous carvings is that of a large detailed vulture on one of the central pillars. As mentioned, the vulture is often interpreted as a symbol of death or a messenger between the living and the dead, but its exact significance remains open to these people. These carvings have drawn comparisons to the symbolic art found in other ancient cultures, but Gobekli Tepe is so much earlier and so much farther away than those civilizations that there is no way of telling. Another striking feature of Gobekli Tepe is the absence of human remains or burials. While the site is filled with intricately carved stones and massive pillars, there is no evidence of graves or human bodies that have been found, which is highly unusual for a site that is theorized to be a religious and living site. There is no evidence of human sacrifice, animal sacrifice, or even just a range of graves. If the people had really not practiced any sacrifice, then you would at least expect a town to have a graveyard, but there's no evidence of any burial sites. In other ancient religious sites, burial practices often accompany the ritual use of the space. But at Gobekli Tepe, the lack of graves has led some to speculate that the site may not have had a burial site at all. Instead, it might have been a place where rituals were performed for the living, and possible early forms of cremation. The site could have possibly been used as honoring animals instead of the dead to ensure a good food source. As mentioned, the people clearly weren't reliant on agriculture, but instead animals, and so praying to gods which they perceived as in control of animals could likely help them in their survival. Many suggest that the lack of graves could have been an early form of cremation, which would have been very monumental for this society. The absence of human remains has led archaeologists to suggest that the site may have been dedicated to a form of ancestor worship or spirit veneration. Alternatively, it could have been that use of rituals at Gobekli Tepe were focused on the life and fertility of a person, not so much on the afterlife. Gobekli Tepe has forced historians to rethink the origins of religion, architecture, and social human organization. Prior to its discovery, it was assumed that religious structures like temples and shrines would not appear until societies after they had settled and developed agricultural practices. The idea was that people needed stable food sources and larger populations to support such complex projects. Gobekli Tepe, however, challenges this assumption by showing that early hunter-gatherer societies could have built monumental structures for religious or ceremonial purposes long before ever having a food source. As it stands today, the site is one of the most intriguing and mysterious archaeological sites that we have discovered. And while there is very much still to be uncovered about the site's age, its monumental nature, and its likely use as a ritual center, many questions remain unanswered. The purpose of the site, The identity of its builders and the meaning behind all of the carvings continue to elude scholars today. The fact that the site was probably deliberately buried around 8000 BCE only adds to this mystery, suggesting that the people who built it may have concealed it for a reason that we may never know. If you enjoyed this video, then consider giving the video a like and subscribing, as well as maybe even watching the videos I've posted on this page already. But with all that being said, thank you for watching up until this point in the video.